3, 6, y, you end up with 5x plus 3.
Hello everyone, today we will be having the domain of a function. Recall that domain is the set of all values that a variable x can take. Hindi lahat ng numbers pwedeng i-substitute kasi there are some numbers na kung sinubstitute mo sa function, it will yield a number that is impossible to plot, especially if we are going to graph it in the Cartesian plane. In the Cartesian plane, we only cater to the real numbers. At may mga numbers na hindi real numbers. Ano yung mga numbers na to? We have here the square root of a negative number and the undefined expression. Later, we are going to talk more about these numbers. So how do we find the domain of a function? If we are given a polynomial function like this, we don't have to worry about this. Kasi any numbers can be substituted in place of x. Mapa-negative number man yan, mapa-fraction, mapa-decimal. Kung isa-substitute natin ang mga numbers na yan, it will yield an answer that is a real number. So to write the domain of this function, okay, we can write it in set builder notation. So the set of all x such that x is an element of real number. Ibig sabihin nito, lahat ng real numbers ay pwedeng i-substitute in place of x. Or we can also write it in interval notation. In interval notation, we can write it this way. All numbers from negative infinity until positive infinity. So the domain of any polynomial function is the set of all real numbers. Okay. Now, what if we are given a function that is underneath a radical? We are avoiding this expression right here, a square root of a negative number. Why? If we are going to take the square root of this, for example, square root of 25, there can be two answers. The square root of 25 is either positive 5 or negative 5. If we are going to multiply 5 to itself, it will give us 25. If we are going to multiply negative 5 to itself, it will also give us 25. But what if we are going to extract the square root of negative 25? To extract this, we can actually do this. So we can separate negative 1 from 25. And we can extract the root of 25, which is 5. At may natira sa loob na negative 1. And negative 1 here is what we call an imaginary number. This is a number beyond the real number system. Sa Cartesian plane lang kasi po, ang kinikater lang na number doon ay yung mga real numbers. Okay? This is a number that we can never find in the Cartesian plane. So this is what we are avoiding. So how then do we get the domain of a radical function? Okay. To get the domain of a radical function, we have to get the expression inside the radical. So the expression inside the radical is x plus 1. Iniiwasan natin na mag-negative yung nasa loob. Kasi kung mag-negative yung nasa loob ng radical, it will give us an imaginary number. So we have to set the expression inside the radical greater than or equal to 0. Okay, greater than or equal to 0. Bakit? Iniiwasan nga natin yung mga negative. After setting it greater than or equal to 0, we solve for x. And so now we can write the domain, which is the set of all x such that x is greater than or equal to negative 1. So ang ibig sabihin nito, lahat ng numbers from negative 1 pataas, pwedeng i-substitute. Why? Bakit hindi pwede yung mga numbers na mas mababa sa negative 1? If we are going to draw the number line, at kung nandito si negative 1, yung mga numbers from negative 1 to infinity, yun lang yung mga pwedeng i-substitute. Why? Bakit hindi pwede yung negative 2? If we are going to evaluate the function at negative 2, it will become like this. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. And you see, we have here a negative expression inside the radical, and that is something that we cannot graph. To write this in interval notation, it will look like this. Negative 1 until positive infinity. But then negative 1 is included. So we use the square bracket. So yan po ang domain ng function na square root of x plus 1. Now, what if we have this? Now, this is also a radical function, but as you can see, we have a quadratic expression inside the radical. So to get the domain, always remember, to get the domain of a radical function, you get the expression inside the radical, you set it greater than or equal to 0. Greater than or equal to 0. Now, the next thing you're going to look at is if the quadratic is factorable, and obviously factorable yan. Now, in solving a quadratic inequality, we rewrite the inequality symbol to an equal sign. Kasi later, we are going to test din naman yung mga number kung included sila or hindi. Now, we solve for x. So we have here two x values. But how do we write our domain? Before we write the domain, we have to determine if these numbers are included in our domain. To do that, we have to draw the number line and we have to locate these numbers. So if this is 0, we have here negative 2 and we have negative 3. Now, if we are going to substitute negative 3 in the inequality, okay, let's see if it will satisfy the inequality, no? So negative 3 squared is positive 9. Now 5 times negative 3 is negative 15 plus 6 greater than or equal to 0. Now 9 minus 15 is actually negative 6, and negative 6 plus 6 is 0. And is 0 greater than or equal to 0? Yes. So we are going to shade negative 3 because negative 3 is included, na satisfy niya yung inequality natin. Next is to test if negative 2 is included in the domain. Okay, so negative 2 raised to 2 is positive 4. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. We have here plus 6. Is it greater than or equal to 0? Now, 4 minus 10 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. And is 0 greater than or equal to 0? Yes. So, si negative 2 po, na-satisfy yung inequality. So, we have to shade negative 2. It is included in the domain. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to get a test point, or we have to get a number from these intervals. Tingnan natin if it will satisfy the inequality. Kasi kung na-satisfy niya yung inequality, then it is part of the domain. So, let's get a number to the left of negative 3. So, ano ba yung mga number to the left of negative 3? We can have negative 4. So, if we are going to substitute negative 4, okay, so negative 4 raised to 2 is 16. Now, negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. We have here plus 6 greater than or equal to 0. Now, 16 minus 20 is negative 4. And negative 4 plus 6 is positive 2. Now, is 2 greater than or equal to 0? Yes. 2 is greater than or equal to 0. Na-satisfy yung quadratic inequality. Therefore, the numbers to the left of negative 3 is part of the domain of the function. So all numbers from negative 3 until the negative infinity is part of the domain. Now let's try getting a number sa gitna ng negative 3 and negative 2, and we can have here negative 2.5. So if we are going to substitute the negative 2.5, let's see. So negative 2.5 raised to 2 is 6.25. Now 5 times negative 2.5 is negative 12.5. We have here plus 6 greater than or equal to 0. If I'm going to simplify this, we are going to have negative 0.25. And is 0.25 greater than or equal to 0? No, it's not greater than or equal to 0. Negative number is not greater than 0. So the numbers in between negative 3 and negative 2 is not part of the domain. Now, let's try to get a number na nasa left ng -2. Let's test if it is included in the domain. Let's try to get 0, and we substitute 0 to the quadratic inequality. Okay. Now 0 raised to 2 is 0. Well, 5 times 0 is 0. So ang natitira lang dyan is actually 6. And is 6 greater than or equal to 0? Yes, 6 is greater than 0. So we can conclude that all numbers from -2 until positive infinity are part of the domain of the function. So to write the domain of our function in interval notation, we can write it this way. -3 is included. Since there are two intervals, we use the union of sets. -2 is included, we use square brackets until positive infinity. So this is the domain of our function. So yung mga numbers lang from -infinity up until -3 at yung mga numbers from -2 to positive infinity, sila lang po yung pwedeng i-substitute sa function. Next, we have here a rational function. And yung ina-avoid naman natin sa rational function ay kung mag-0 ang denominator. Because a number with a denominator of 0 is undefined. And this is also a number that is impossible to plot in the Cartesian plane. How then do we write the domain of this function? Okay. We can write it in set builder notation. Alam naman na natin yung bawal dito. Lahat ng numbers pwedeng i-substitute except ang 0. So the set of all x such that x is not equal to 0. Or we can also write it in interval notation. Paano natin isusulat to in interval notation? We use the number line 0. Since 0 is not included, all numbers from this part and this part are the domain. So this is from -infinity until 0 and 0 until positive infinity. To write this in interval notation, it will look like this. 0 not included, that's why we are going to use parentheses. So yun po. So that's how we get the domain of a function. So I have a part 2 for this topic. Please watch it because I will be giving more examples for the domain of a rational function. So thank you for watching.